It's now our pleasure to welcome to the stage my colleague and co-director of ITIC and Invest Tourism, Mr. Gerald Lawless, who will be now in conversation with Ms. Julia Simpson, the CEO of World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC. Gerald not only is a director of ITIC, but also the former CEO and founder president of the Jumeirah Hotel Group, and amongst his many accolades, also a former chairman of the World Travel and Tourism Council. So he's very well placed to enter the conversation on restarting the travel and tourism sector with Julia Simpson. Gerald.
Thank you very much, Paul, but I'm not really accustomed to doing a hard talk interview, but don't worry, it's not going to be a hard talk, Julia. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Julia Simpson, who has recently taken over as the CEO of the World Travel and Tourism Council after many years with British Airways on their various boards and with IAG. And I even believe as an advisor to prime ministers in the past as well, Julia. So it's a fantastic career. And I think in the industry, we're so fortunate to have you leading what I believe is one of the very, very special organizations within travel and tourism that represents so well the entire private sector of the business. And it's great to see it being led by somebody who really knows and has a background in understanding what it takes to make businesses work and what businesses need to ensure that their industry is properly recognized. And I think this is one of the great themes that we have. So Julia, I've put a few notes on what I want to ask you, and if you don't mind, I'll start by saying that since you've come into the World Travel and Tourism Council, if I would ask, what are, say, your top 3 priorities initially for what you want to achieve within the WTTC in your first year?
Well, Gerald, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me today. It's a really fantastic event, and I think, as Mark said, it's just amazing. It's just amazing to see so many friends in the audience and to get this conference, the World Travel Market, back up and running. So I started 3 months ago, and I would say that my 3 priorities, one is restarting travel, and the numbers that we're looking at is there are 62 million jobs that were lost in the pandemic, and I am determined that every one of those 62 million jobs we get back. And the numbers that we're looking at the WTTC, we do some unique research actually with Oxford, and the numbers we're looking at is there's every chance that as long as governments maintain some common sense and don't go backwards, or we don't have a second pandemic, that we will get those jobs back by the end of 2022 and may even exceed it. So it's restarting travel. My second point, and here I bow to Taleb, who gave a fantastic speech earlier. The first time I met Taleb, he said to me, we've got 4 billion people, or 5 years worth of pain before we get the whole of the world vaccinated. And we cannot have a world that's moving around in any way, shape or form unless we step up action on global vaccination. And the way you do that is by ensuring that wherever you're traveling, whether the individual countries only have a set vaccine, but they recognize the WHO vaccines. And the other way is by supporting COVAX and getting these vaccinations out to the whole world. Because I thought it was very interesting what Ian said. The danger that we're in with this pandemic economically is we could go into very, very wealthy and very, very poor. We could have that polarization of haves and have-nots, and it's completely unacceptable. So that's 2. And my third one is obviously sustainability. Sustainability is coming at us as fast. I think, as the professor said, we need green investments. It's not like the old days where you just go and build a few more schools and a few more railways and a few more runways. Our sector, travel and tourism, obviously it includes different industries, some of which have not got easy pathways to net zero, if you're in aviation or if you're in cruise liners, but I want to come back to that in a minute. Others, like hotels, it's slightly more within their ability to do it, and obviously the travel and tour operators. But as we know, when we talk about sustainability, it's about people. And if 80% of travel and tourism are small family-run businesses, these are people that are keeping bread on their families' tables every day. They're completely close to their communities. So I think that while I sit here representing very proudly the 200 CEOs of the very top travel and tourism companies, I'm also trying to give a voice to those small and medium businesses, which are our lifeblood.
Thank you. But when you talk about the first point about getting the people back to work, and it seems almost incredible when you hear that we're short of people after so many people have lost their jobs over the last 2 years. And yes, I know the furlough system and everything. Do you think there's also something else, that people are looking at different ways to work, different ways of doing things, particularly when you look at working from home, young people in their startups, and how they're actually getting financing, because very much we're seeing, well, as we said, interest rates are low, so it's not that difficult to raise money. Do you think we have a bit of a challenge? And I think a lot more in our subsector of the tourism travel sector, the hotel sector. Do you think we have a challenge due to the image of the hotel sector and actually getting young people to want to come back to work?
Yeah, I think labour shortages are certainly an issue, but it's not globally even. So we've got them in Europe, we've got them in the UK, we've got them in America, but obviously if you went to Africa, there's all that unbelievable talent, incredible talent. So it's about how getting the right people to the right places. And I think, yeah, we all like sitting at home in Zoom with your gym jams on the bottom half and your suit on the top half and having a very important meeting. But that's not what hospitality is about. Our business is about people. And I still think there are young people in our society that love connecting with people. And it's also about communities connecting with people that come to visit them. So I don't think Zoom is ever going to be replace that. Interestingly, as we become a more technological society and more jobs can be done at home, there will be fewer and fewer jobs that do require real human beings, and our sector is one of those. And there will always be passionate people that don't want to sit with their gym jams on the bottom and the suit on the top. They want to get out there and they want to connect to people. So yes, and has our industry, yes, I think we do need to really look closely at how we value people, how we treat people. But generally, you know this from your experience, that when people join our sector, they tend not to leave. You do get churn at the lower sectors, but there's very, very good careers, because I think Talib was saying this as well. Remember that our sector employs a lot of people. I call it the polite way of saying it is direct entry jobs.
Exactly.
It's people without college educations. Now, we all know that we're in a big battle globally for talent, for mind, people with big brains. But actually, there are a lot of people with big brains but never get the opportunity to go to college. Yeah. So our fabulous sector allows those people to get their first foot on the ladder of a job. I mean, how amazing is that? And also, as Talib was saying, over 50% of our world are women. And also women from very, very diverse backgrounds.
But I will interrupt you there and say there's always been an issue in that, for example, in the hotel management colleges, the majority of students would be female, but then look at the number of women who are managers of hotels. It's improving, it's increasing, and will continue. But I do believe we have a long way to go in that regard.
I think we have. I think you're absolutely right, and I could give a whole lecture on unconscious bias. And I think unconscious bias works both ways, and you'll see boardrooms full of, if I may say, white men, and they have all the very, very best intentions, but somehow it doesn't happen, and you really, really do need some very, very strong positive action about pulling people up and taking risks, because if you are a leader of colour, and you're in a leading position, if you see it is, I think, incumbent on you, as I do with women, is to give a hand up and a pull-up. But what people worry about is what happens if that person isn't 150%. You know, I always say that men are allowed to be about 85%, bit iffy. But, you know, if you do that, and I'm going to say today, it doesn't matter. We all have an equal right to maybe get it right, maybe get it wrong. We have to take risks, be bold, and bring those people up with us and have them by our side.
Well, we were very proud of that in Jamaica back in the day.
Yeah.
People like Doris Greif, who's here now in the Langham Hotel, as really top-class senior management within the group.
Yeah.
But it's, it is very interesting. I always think as well is that you talk about governments and their role in encouraging people to work within our industry, understanding that like they have, for example, in Germany, where they have a lot more of the craft industry, where they have proper training, good training. I don't say we don't have it here as well in the UK. I do think, though, that STEM, as they call it, science, technology, engineering, and whatever the last one is, management, that we need to bring in as well an extra T for tourism. And that we should really try very hard. But I wanted to ask you just very briefly on the vaccination side of what's going on at the moment to prepare the world to travel again. What do you think then about people like me of a certain age getting a third injection, a third vaccination? And how do you see we could distribute more evenly and more fairly and more aggressively to the developing world?
I think one of the issues, and I'm not an expert on this, but one of the issues is licensing. So it's allowing individual countries around the world to be able to build their own vaccine plants or factories, whatever you have in a...
Yes.
And I was actually speaking to the Minister of Tourism in Kenya, and he was explaining to me how in Kenya they are going to start having their own labs, I think at the beginning of next year, so that they're not entirely dependent. But that requires the pharmaceutical companies and governments are giving them licenses.
And WHO.
And WHO, thank you. So I think that's one of the key ways of doing it.
I know our time is very short here today, so I have a few things to cover.
Yeah.
The other thing I'd like to talk about is, with COP26 going on in Glasgow, and with our industry, we can't have this conversation without a large part of it being talked about. How do we cope with the challenges? How do we cope with the detractors who say, you are bad for the industry? I was saying that, airlines only put 2.7% carbon emissions into the atmosphere. Then the and climatology people will say, well, yes, but at that altitude, it's much more destructive. And how do you see ourselves going forward in the business to be able to somehow convince these people who are rightly are saying we have a problem? How do we contribute to the solution?
Yeah, it's a really good question. What I always say is that absolutely all human activity contributes to the carbon challenge. Yeah. So if I get on my mobile phone now and I search the latest cricket scores or whatever it is, that whizzes all the way over to a big database that fires up in Virginia in America. But what's happened is some sectors have become slightly more demonized, may I say, than others. So I say the enemy is not travel and tourism, or indeed doing a Google search, or me buying 5 dresses in a year. The enemy is the carbon. That's what we need to focus on. I think we also need to balance it with economic wealth and well-being for people, and then look at it industry by industry. I do come from an aviation background, and I was really surprised when I joined British Airways about 15 years ago, how they were writing environmental reports in the 1970s. These people are really, really serious about what they do. They are absolutely committed. And yes, there are new planes that are up to 50% more efficient. Some of us may have heard Mr. Ryanair on the radio this morning, making, may I say, sustainability a competitive issue against his competitors wrong. I mean, he's great. Mr. O'Leary is fantastic. But we've got to stop making green issues, my plane's greener than your plane. It's not going to help. That doesn't help the industry ultimately, I have to say.
Why not, though? Does it not make the competitors want to catch up?
Yes, you could say that. You could say that. But I actually believe that we all know the truths when we're in the industry, that actually, you know, an A320 at full capacity, whether it's Ryanair, EasyJet, British Airways, whatever it is, you know, the fuel burn is more or less the same. So it is a good challenge, and I do accept that. But what's happened in aviation is they've made massive investments in new aircraft, and that has meant in a very, very low profit margin industry, telling their shareholders, we're not going to give you a return this quarter because we are taking your money that you have given to us and we are going to buy these new aircraft instead of still flying the 747s with 4 engines that were completely paid off, which would have meant I could have possibly paid you a dividend. So these are the very difficult conversations people are having to have with their investors. But you do have hydrogen, you do have electrics coming down the line. You know, there are sustainable, when I was there, we were investing in sustainable alternative fuels that was taking household waste, rubbish, nappies, literally, and turning it into high octane jet fuel.
Wow.
Now, there's a big problem because governments have given a lot of support to electric cars and electric vehicles, and that is a big problem, but absolutely no support to aviation. Exactly. So we need to say that if we are taking our investors' money for the right of the planet and we're investing in all these things, we do need a little bit of help. Because you are right, we're not going to, in aviation, get there as quickly as other people.
Right. And I would imagine as well, I flew last week on an A380 with Emirates back to Dubai from London. There were over 600 people on board. Now, per passenger, per kilometre, that must have been very fuel efficient in comparison maybe to a half-empty train driving on a diesel engine 400 kilometres.
Yeah.
So it's, no, I do agree.
And that's why I think we shouldn't demonize sectors. It's a bit late, you know, and I think we need to say, what are we doing? Is it completely honest, truthful, really getting to the nub of it? And sometimes where we cannot reduce a carbon footprint in a particular industry faster than others, is there a proper globally recognized offset scheme like Corsia that is run by the United Nations and gets a proper seal of approval? So you don't buy a forest and then when you look around 5 years later, someone's cut it down. Because I know that happened to someone.
I thought the real phenomenon of the COVID has been the phenomenon of staycations. Yes. And this is really interesting because for hotels, well, that's fine. We don't really mind if the people come from China or the people come from Middlesex to go somewhere, as long as they fill our hotel at a reasonable rate. We've seen this phenomenon in Ras Al Khaimah, for example, in the United Arab Emirates. What's your take on that? How do you see that going forward? Do you think that there will be a continuous growth in people discovering their own locations, their own countries?
Well, I think it has been wonderful for people to discover their own countries, although, you know, a friend of mine walked on the Hadrian Wall for 4 days in the rain. So, you know, there's only so much discovering your own country if you're living in the UK that you can stand. But,
Mr. Barton would agree with you there. He wants you to come back to Jamaica. Welcome. Good to see you, sir.
Welcome. And I wanted to actually say something about Jamaica because it's doing fantastic work, and I will get at that in a second. Good. But I think staycations have been brilliant. People are looking for the outdoors, but they are also desperate to travel. And you've got to remember, tourism isn't only about going on holidays. It is about those families who've been separated. It's about religious holidays. You know, there are a lot of aspects. So I think people are, and if you look at it economically, it's helped some countries not go completely under. For others, it's not helped at all. China, as the professor said, has done quite well with because it's so big. So if you're big, it's been good. Yes. But if you're small, it's not so good. But I did, while we've got wonderful minister, fantastic, from Jamaica with us today, I want to say what a fantastic job Jamaica's done, because we've been getting and you can explain it better than me, but Jamaica, they've done a fully vaxxed area. It's like a cordon sanitaire, or however you would call it. People are really safe traveling there. They're using people in the hotel sector to go out into communities where some communities might be feeling a bit anxious about getting the vaccine, and encouraging the take-up of the vaccine, and also using their own hotels as mini vaccination centres. I mean, I think Jamaica's done a fantastic
And we've
job.
got Sierra Leone as well.
Sierra Leone. I
yes,
beg your pardon,
Minister.
Your Excellency. How lovely. Yeah, great
thank you.
work. Thank you.
And I'm been told to wrap up, but I can't just yet.
Yeah.
I want to ask you as well. You know, we hear about this. Everybody wants to go to a place, stay in a lodge somewhere with a big room and not have too many people around them. But you know, I think, what about the factory worker who deserves a holiday in Spain and wants to go to the nightclub and have a bit of fun and go out? Are we saying, no, that kind of tourism is now not going to happen anymore?
I think people will still be looking for value and for fun and for meeting people.
And how do we make it PC? How do we make it politically correct, acceptable? To not allow, but to have and encourage this type of tourism?
I think safety protocols, you know, being very respectful of the country you're in, to follow their protocols, the scientists continuously monitoring it. But I think we can all go, you and I can go to the disco, Gerard, and Gerald, and have a good time.
That's
I also see John in the audience today, and I just want to give a shout out because John runs a wonderful organisation, John Sage, and he's trying to ensure that our businesses can be accessible to people with disabilities that come in all shapes and sizes, not always visible, as we know. And I absolutely impress on anyone to have John's presentation, because there's so much money there hanging, waiting for hoteliers to really get their act together.
And
actually, if I may say, target this very, very valuable segment of people. You know, it's not about pity, it's about really getting money through the door and giving everyone a wonderful holiday. So well done,
We've met
John,
John
for
in
your
Dubai
work.
as well. He's very broad-minded also in terms of the different people with different disabilities. And it's really fantastic to see what you're doing, John, and congratulations on that. Last one then, your chairman now is Arnold Donald.
Yes.
All the cruise liners. What's going to happen to the cruise industry? Is it finished?
I think it's coming back strong. You know, I spoke to him the other day, and they've got more bookings genuinely than they can handle. It's the point we were talking about, pent-up demand. They haven't got the berths for the people that want to travel. And that, you know, that's a great credit, because people think of COVID, you think, I'm going to be on a boat for all that time. But people now know that they take such care. In fact, that happened pre-pandemic because they had other health scares years ago, and they've been doing hand sanitizing and things for years. So cruise is coming back strong, I'm delighted to say.
Oh, that's great news, it really is.
After we've been partying in Spain, we'll go on a cruise together.
Yeah,
we
we will. And then what about the final thing? How do you see in the MICE business, as an acronym I don't like, but the meetings, incentives, conferences and exhibitions, how do you see that now coming together with virtual? And of course we have virtual audience today, thousands of people, you know, in different parts of the world. What do you think about that generally? What's your take on the interaction of virtual and in person?
I think it's a great thing. I like hybrid events. I think it does mean, for example, now we've all got businesses and friends and colleagues that can be in China or Australia, and they can't be here today, can they? So I think it's fantastic that they can, you know, I don't know if they're up at the moment, but, you know, that they can join us virtually. More the merrier, that's what I say.
Now, the last thing, what's your last burning issue that you really want to talk to the audience about with regard?
Burning issue. I really, really hope that governments can never go back to having red lists where we put whole countries on the naughty step. It's been so damaging, and you know, in the UK it's massively damaged the UK economy. They've really shot themselves in the foot. I have to, even though I'm British, I think it was shameful, really. And the thing is, we can manage risk on an individual basis. And my other thing was, we all talk about being double vaxxed and everything. We do need to be very respectful about the people around the world that can't get the vaccine, or some people will never be able to get a vaccine for various reasons we don't need to go into now. So we still will need a system of light touch testing that does not cost $200 per family member. Because
should be part of our global aid, shouldn't it?
Exactly. If you want to do PCR testing as a government to do the genome sequencing, with the greatest respect to government officials present, I think the government should pay for it. But for the average traveller, antigen, off you go.
No, very good. And now I say we have to make room for you. One of your colleagues in the industry, Gates Al-Gates from Fly Dubai, will be talking to us in a few minutes from Dubai. I'm sure you'll be very interested to hear what he has to say. But Julia Simpson, thank you so much for joining us. We're really honoured. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.